some of the dear friends that we have met and have become very dear to us. I'll have to retrack a little and go back. While at Marston, we had our first little boy living with us, the three of us. Now this youngster came to us while we were still at Castle Rock. He was born on the 21st of August, 1926. And of course, the first child and a boy was quite a blessing and quite an event in our lives. I remember my mother and father, who hardly ever got very far away from their home in Morgan, came up there at that time, and I remember Grandpa Rock holding little Dale, as he was named, in his arms, and tears coming to his eyes and streaming down his cheeks. And I don't guess there was ever a prouder dad as I stood there and contemplated this scene. We've, at Church Buttes, we enjoyed our stay here for approximately 2.5 years. And then there was no school at this place. And we were thinking of getting closer back to home, and perhaps where we might be able to get nearer a school. And so another section at Night, Wyoming, and this was about 17 miles east of Evanston, came up for bid. And I was able, with my seniority, to bid this section in and became section foreman there. And we moved there and stayed at this place for, well, until the Great Depression come in the early 30s. And the railroad was cutting back on many sections and much expense. And so this was one of the sections that was cut off or discontinued in March of 1933. And we were forced at this time to move back to Morgan and work there again as a section hand for Jim Thompson on the section at Morgan. We had a great amount of enjoyment here at Night. Our sister and brother-in-law, Ralph and Elda, and Fernando Jensen and Eva from Morgan, and Marlo Carter and Edna, and another couple, the Claire Harveys from Mountain View, all worked for me on the section here at Night. And we continued to have a lot of fun together. We had our a lot of parties and a lot of good meals, a lot of good times throughout the winter. And here at this place, our children were growing up now, and we had a Book of Mormon class for the adults, and then we had a kind of a little Sunday school for our children. These weren't authorized by the church, but we attempted to call them that, and we received and give our children their first learning in church. We, of course, couldn't get out of this place at all in the wintertime with the car. We were snowed in, and the only way we could get out was on a train, which didn't happen very often. When we moved from this place, it had been a very heavy, hard winter with lots of snow, and we were called on to move away from here in March, and that snow was still several feet deep. And so the only way we could get out of here was to go straddle the rails on the railroad tracks with our cars. Our furniture and belongings had preceded us in a boxcar. And John Overman was the general roadmaster, and he held the eastbound trains at Evanston, and then they were held at the tunnel east of us, flagged all these trains while we straddled the rails and went down the tracks. I suppose we did go to Millis, which was perhaps 4 miles west of us. And in this traveling this distance, we even had to cross over the Bear River on the ties of a railroad bridge. This seemed quite hazardous, but we all succeeded in getting down to Millis, where the snowplow had come into there, and from there on we were able to get to Evanston and then on down to our destination. During our stay on the railroad in Wyoming, which was about 18 years, whenever a new child was to be born to Mom, she would go down to one of our parents' home, either her parents, who was still on the railroad, or to my home in Morgan. And there the baby would be delivered with a local doctor. It was on the 20th of June, 1928. Our second child, a little girl who we called Donna May, was born. And at these births, of course, I would always get enough time off to be there. And I know when Donna came along, she had a hard time coming into this world, and she was having a very hard time after she was born. I know that she was born at her folks' home in Castle Rock in a section house, and a Dr. Eskelson from Evanston was the doctor that came down there. And these old doctors would sit around while the women were in labor pains and just amuse themselves until it happened. I don't think you would find a doctor today that would give of their time like these faithful old country doctors did at that time. Well, when Donna was brought into the world, we just had a very hard time of keeping her alive. My mother was there, and she was always a very special angel of mercy in times like this. She had a lot of knowledge and a lot of know-how, and I remember we had to, the doctor, when she was born, had to use his mouth to her mouth to finally start breath going into her body. And then for several hours it was just touch and go, and I know finally the doctor asked if they had just a little whiskey or alcohol in the house. And this was produced, and he put just a little bit on a spoon, diluted with a little water, and gave her this. And then they finally put her, we had old wood coal-burning stoves, kitchen stoves at that time, and they opened the old heating oven where they used to bake bread and things like that, and wrapped her in a blanket and put her in this oven with the door open. Well, not full heat, but it was quite warm. And they kept her in there and take her out and then put her back in, and finally got her to associate herself with this life and this world a little better. And she finally made the grade and decided and continued to stay with us and be part of our home. She was a special blessing to us and has been all of her life. She's always shown a great deal of love and consideration for her brothers and sisters and for Mom and Pop. But this wasn't the end of her trials in life. Even while we had her out on the sections in various places, she quite often got a congestion in her throat, and we just had a hard time sometimes in the winter of keeping her breathing. Father Fernelius had received and bid on a section at Wanship, Utah. And so by the time our next child was born, which was on the 5th of August, 1930, this took place in their home at Wanship. And we had a doctor from Colville deliver this baby. Jerry also was a welcome sight unto us, another little boy. He was a large baby. As I remember, he weighed a little better than 11 pounds when he came into the world. And just a little pun, Jerry, he's carried a pretty good weight ever since, all his life. But he's always been a jovial, happy, industrious person, and one that we've looked with pride throughout our lives together. Our fourth child, also a son, Kenneth Heber, was born while we were on the section at night, as we have just previously related. And this was on the 23rd of July in 1932. And he was born at the home of my parents in Morgan. We had Dr. Abbott deliver this baby, and of course my mother was there to wait on and take care of Mom throughout this ordeal. You know, in those days, when a sister gave birth to a baby, it was advisable, and well, they were always told that they would have to stay in bed, and they couldn't even put their feet to the floor for about 10 days after the baby was born. This idea has changed by now, and they probably have them up walking around just about as soon as the baby's delivered. But it took a lot of waiting on and a lot of nursing, it seemed like then, to get them back to where they could take care of the household chores. And perhaps that was some influence in this way of life, because they didn't have a whole lot of things done for them by machines and electricity in their modern homes like we have done now. It was all mostly done by hand, and they had to be qualified to start in and take over these chores. Well, Kenneth also has been a joy and a pride and blessing to us throughout our lives. We've watched these